everyone, this is Marika and welcome back to this new session of Community Health Nursing with me. In our previous session, we have discussed about communication, different types of communication, barriers of communication, and the linkage a district hospital should have. We also discussed a very interesting topic in our previous session, which was agent, biological agent, and host. In this session today as well, we are going to discuss a very interesting topic as well as a very important topic, which is immunity. The term immunity is very familiar to all of us, right? We hear people saying my immunity is very strong, and some people say that my immunity is very weak. But what is immunity? And how does a human get the immunity? Is it present in the human being at the time of birth, or is it acquired by the human beings? Let us see in detail about what is immunity, what are the different cells that are involved in giving immunity to a human body, and what are the different types of immunity. In a very simple term, immunity is the ability of our body to fight against or to defend against pathogenic microorganisms. Now, to put into very simple terms, immunity can be described as the ability of individual's body to fight against the disease-causing microorganisms. Now, we've already seen in our previous session what is an agent and how does the agent affect our body, or how agent produces illness in our body. So those agents are the pathogenic microorganism which enters our body and produces changes in our tissues, in our physiological functioning, causing illness that enters our body to cause diseases. Immunity can also be described as a resistance that is developed by the host. What is a host? As we have discussed in our previous session, host is the person who harbors the microorganism, right? It can be a plant, it can be an animal, it can be a human being who harbors microorganism. Now, another meaning of immunity is the resistance that is developed by the host. Resistance to what? Resistant towards injury that is caused by the microorganism and their toxic products. As we are already aware, the agent enters our body, and not just the agent, not just a single agent. There can be several different factors, several different forces that affects our body and causes illness. So as a host, the human body starts to develop resistance towards those microorganisms and their toxic products. That resistance that is developed by a host body is called as immunity. On a daily basis or on an everyday basis, our body is exposed to various pathogens, various microorganisms in the environment, but only few of the pathogens or only few of the microorganisms will be able to produce the disease in an individual, right? Why does this happen? This happens because our body has the immunity to fight against various microorganisms that we find in the environment. Our body releases the antibodies against those pathogenic microorganisms, and the antibodies will fight against those pathogens and will not let them produce any kind of disease or any kind of symptoms in our body. This entire process of our body being able to fight against the pathogenic microorganism, defend itself against the pathogen, is called as immunity. Immunity is the resistance that is developed by the host against disease-causing agents or pathogenic microorganisms. I hope you've understood what is immunity. Now, let us see what are the types of immunity. Immunity is majorly classified into two different categories, which is the innate immunity and acquired immunity. We are going to see in detail about innate immunity first, and then we will discuss about acquired immunity. What is innate immunity? The term innate itself explains a lot, right? So innate immunity is the type of immunity that is present from the time of the birth in an individual. Innate immunity refers to the body's defense mechanism. So when the pathogen attacks a human body, the innate immunity, as it is present in the human body from the time of birth, the innate immunity will get activated immediately. Innate immunity includes certain barriers and defense mechanism that keeps the pathogenic microorganism from entering our body. The innate immunity will help our body to fight against the pathogenic microorganisms by providing us with the natural resistant components such as salivary enzymes, natural killer cells, intact skin, and neutrophils, etc. Now, all of these components are produced as an initial response to any kind of infection, right? So when pathogenic organism attacks our body, the innate immunity gets activated. The innate immunity has certain factors factors and defense mechanisms such as salivary enzymes, neutrophils, intact skin, and all of this are produced as an initial response to the infection. We can also say that the innate immunity is a long-term immunity in which our body itself produces the antibodies that are required in order to fight against any kind of infection. And another very interesting thing about human body is that our body have certain barriers that will fight against the entry or invasion of the microorganism. So our body is developed in such a way, our body is made in such a way that we have certain barriers to fight against the pathogenic microorganisms in our body. So these barriers are the natural barriers that are present in our body. Now there are different types of natural barriers, which includes the first type of natural barrier is the physical natural barrier. Under physical natural barrier, we have skin, we have eyelashes, we have gastrointestinal tract and the respiratory tract. So all of these are the physical natural barrier to any kind of pathogen, and these are the first line of defense against any kind of infection. We think the skin is just providing us with a particular complexion, a fair complexion or a darker complexion, but the skin has a lot more to do. When we understand the function of the skin, it has a lot more to do than just providing a complexion to an individual. As we know, the skin is the outermost layer of our body, so the skin acts as a first line defense against any kind of pathogens or disease causing microorganisms. Also, when we think about our nose, the main function of our nose is olfactory sensation or to smell something. Or when we think about our ear, we think it is just for hearing, right? But when we understand about it, there are several layers, right? The mucosal layer in the nose, in the ear, are present there in order to make sure that they are able to trap the pathogenic microorganism and not let it enter directly inside our nose or our ears. So all of these are the major physical barriers of our body, which helps to prevent the entry of microorganisms inside our body directly. The second barrier that we have is a physiological barrier. What are physiological barriers? We know that our stomach has a certain acid present in it. Hydrochloric acid is present in our stomach. That acid is actually required for the digestion purpose. The primary reason for hydrochloric acid to be inside our stomach is for digestion. But did you know when any kind of pathogenic microorganism enters our body with the food that we consume, because of the acidic environment in their stomach, the microorganisms are destroyed before they move forward from the stomach. So it is such an interesting thing that all this, it is such an interesting cut. So it is such an interesting thing that all these physiological characteristics of our body, even though their primary function is different, they act as a physiological barrier. So the acid that is present in our stomach kills all the microorganisms that we consume along with the food because of the acidic environment or the acidic nature of the acid. Similarly, like that, the saliva in our mouth, the tears that comes out of our eyes also have antibiotic properties that does not allow the pathogenic microorganisms to enter inside our body even though they are exposed to the pathogens all day long. So that is all about physiological barrier. The third one we have is cellular barrier. From the term again, we can understand cellular barriers means related to certain kind of cell. Our skin, our hair, our eyelashes, the mucosal layer that we have in our nose and ears, and also physiological barrier like saliva, the tear, the hydrochloric acid in our stomach. But despite of having a physical barrier and psychological barrier, there are some kind of pathogen that manages to enter inside our body in spite of having these barriers. Now, what happens when the physiological barrier or physical barrier fails to control the entry of microorganism? At this particular time, the cellular barrier comes into action. The cellular barrier includes the leukocytes or white blood cells. This includes neutrophils, eosinophils, lymphocytes, basophils, and monocytes. So all of this leukocytes acts against the pathogenic microorganism, engulfs the microorganisms, and help the individual to develop resistance towards the pathogenic microorganism. And the last type of barrier is cytokine barrier. Now, our body, our cells are much smarter than we think or we give them credit for. For example, in case of any virus invasion or in case of any bacterial invasion, when any kind of pathogen enters inside our body, our cell starts to release a certain kind of protein which is called as interferon. Now, these interferon has a very special function. So the special protein, which is called as interferon, it goes and it encircles or surrounds the infected cell, right? There is virus invasion, the virus has infected a particular cell. So the interferon that is released goes to the infected cells, coats the infected cell, encloses the infected cells, forms a coating outside the infected cells and does not let the infection spread forward. So this is a cytokine barrier of our body. I hope you've understood the different kind of natural barriers that our body have, such as the barriers that are present in our body includes physical barriers, physiological barriers, cytokinase, and cellular barrier. Now, let us move on and see the different types of cells that are involved in innate immunity. Now, as we know, innate immunity is the immunity that is present in an individual from the time of birth. But what are the different cells in our body that are involved in providing innate immunity is what we are going to discuss now. When we think about human body, we think that as human body, we just need enough amount of food, enough amount of rest, and a certain type of physical exercise to keep us well, right? But when we learn about the functioning of our body, it is such an amazing thing to understand that the cells in our body, each and every cells in our body are acting as an army to protect us from the pathogenic microorganism. The first type of cells that are involved in providing innate immunity are called as phagocytes. Now, it is such an interesting thing to know that the phagocytes will circulate throughout our body and try to find the foreign substance or the foreign material in our body. When the phagocytes come in contact with any foreign material, any material that is outside of our body, they engulf this foreign body and destroys the foreign body, protecting our body from disease, protecting our body from any kind of disease development. The second type of cells involved in providing innate immunity are the macrophages. The second type of cell involved in innate immunity is the macrophages. Have the ability to move across the circulatory system. And what is the major function of a macrophage? The macrophage provides signals such as cytokines to recruit other cells at the site of infections. It is a macrophage that gives the idea, that gives the signal that there is a certain infected cells and you need to come here in order to enclose the infected cell. So that is a major function of macrophage. The third type of cell that we have involved in innate immunity is the mast cell. Mast cells are the type of cells that are majorly involved in providing defense against any kind of pathogen as well as for wound healing. Another cell that is involved in innate immunity is the neutrophils. Neutrophils contain granules that are toxic for the pathogenic microorganism, and if any microorganism comes in contact with the neutrophil, it kills the microorganisms or the pathogen that comes in contact with the neutrophil. The next type of cell that is involved in innate immunity is eosinophil. Like neutrophil, eosinophil also contains certain toxic substances, and when pathogenic microorganisms comes in contact with the eosinophil, it kills the pathogens. Another type of cell involved in innate immunity is natural killer cell. The natural killer cell stops the spread of the disease by destroying the infected host cell. So in a host, the cell will be infected. So when a pathogenic microorganism enters our body, it affects the cells of the host. Therefore, it leads to the development of the disease, right? So if there is any kind of infected cell in the host, it is a natural killer cell that goes and destroys the infected cells so that there will be no further spread of the disease. And the last type of cells that are involved in innate immunity is dendritic cells. The major function of dendritic cells is to sense infection and send a message or a signal to rest of the immune system in our body. So these are the various cells that are involved in innate immunity. That is it for today's session. In this session, we have discussed a very important, very interesting, and a very short topic, which is immunity, and first type of immunity, which is innate immunity. In our next session, we are going to discuss about acquired immunity and also the immunizing agents. I hope the class was helpful, and I'll see you all in the next session. Thank you and have a great day ahead.